I'm Jason with the All Things Open team. I'm here with Edidiong, and I'd like you to introduce yourself to the All Things Open community.
Oh, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Edidiong Askipo, but you can call me Didi. It's just like a short version of my name. I am a senior developer advocate and technical content creator who loves to write, build developer communities, and share my knowledge in the developer community. I also volunteer as a community manager for Open Source Community Africa, which is a non-profit that creates like a diverse and inclusive space for people in Africa to contribute to open source, learn about open source, and just have like a safe space where you can do all things open source, pretty much.
Awesome. You had an amazing keynote at All Things Open. Thank you for being here and presenting that. You just told us about Open Source Community Africa. What's exciting to you about that?
I think the most exciting thing to me is how we moved from just having a small community. Because when we started, right, we had a goal we wanted to achieve, but the things with goals is you want to, but you don't know for sure if it's going to eventually work out, right? So I would say one of the exciting things for me is being able to see that goal come into fruition, right? Being able to move the African continent from barely having just a handful of people who knew what open source was or would contribute to open source, to now having thousands of people actively aware of what open source is, people excited to make their first open source contributions, having projects created by Africans, which if you look 7-8 years back, those things were not existent. So being able to see how we've moved from not having people active in that space in Africa to having a large amount of people is the most exciting thing for me.
Awesome. You've experienced a tremendous amount of growth in a short few years. What were some of the challenges to grow the community?
I would definitely tie it down to in Nigeria there are certain challenges around could be things like power or internet supply. So it's just generally harder to be able to get into tech. So let's say you're in the US and you decide, hey, I want to start a career in tech. There's even just by getting a laptop, right, there's this installmental payment that you could do, right? So you could pay maybe monthly or weekly. But in Nigeria and most African countries, things like that don't exist. So if you don't have bulk money to be able to buy a laptop, you would not have a laptop, right? Or if you don't have money to be able to pay for internet connection, you would not have internet connection or even power supply. And the most crazy part about all of this is even when you have all of the money in the world, you still can't get that security in terms of, oh, you're certain you'd always have power or you'd always have internet. Yes, you'll be better than most people who do not have access to buy these things, but it still doesn't give you that certainty, and that just makes it difficult to be able to let's say contribute to open source or to be able to be participating online or just being active in the community, because you wake up in the morning and instead of you to go do what you want to do, you're thinking, oh shit, would the power go off while I'm trying to do this thing? Or would I even have enough internet to be able to push this stuff to GitHub? So just things like that, I would say, is one of the difficult challenges that people have in Nigeria and most African countries. The fact that the most basic things we should have are not there. So instead of you to worry or focus on the important things, you're worrying about this other stuff.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious, how is the Open Source Community Africa making it easier for people to make their first open source contribution? I know that was a very special moment for you. How are you helping make that a special moment for other people?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Like I mentioned in my keynote, one of the things we wanted to ensure we did was not just talk about what open source is or how you could make an open source contribution. We wanted to show people, take them through that journey, right? So for instance, during every single festival that we host, we always have, the first day is always focused solely on workshops. And in these workshops would have talks that are solely focused on how you can actually contribute. Oftentimes tied to different programming languages or even different aspects, right? Because contributing to open source is not just about being a software engineer. It could be technical writing, it could be designing. So in regards to designing, one of the things we used to do is before we have an open source festival, we'll call out for designers to join the designing team, right? And then they would all contribute to create amazing designs. And then during the event itself, we would have scheduled specific workshops where we're walking people through how to actually contribute. Everybody comes with their laptop. It's not that you're sitting down listening to what someone is saying. It's not like a talk or a panel session. It's actually a workshop. So every single person is doing something, and the speaker is coming to you to see, oh, hey, this is how you're doing this stuff, let's keep pushing. And aside from that, like aside from the festival itself, we also try to host like meetups as often as possible, virtual meetups, and even in the different, because Oscar has different sub-chapters across Africa. So every single chapter lead is the person who leads the sub Oscar community, would also host like smaller meetups within their local community to guide people through making open source contribution. So we do it on a large scale and also on a medium scale.
Sounds like a big family working together.
I know.
You mentioned something about open source is more than just technical contributions. Is there anything you're doing specifically to bring some of that other diversity around, like bringing in designers or bringing in documentation or writers and things like that? Are you doing anything like that to help foster that?
Yeah, more specifically on the writing side, because I participated in the Google Season of Docs program in like 2019, which pretty much connects like technical writers and open source organizations, right? And one of the things that then at the time was like I was literally the only African who got accepted. So after I experienced, like I had gone through the program, one of the things I ensured that I did was I tried to be very vocal about like how writers could come into open source space. Like I remember giving a talk at All Things Open in like I can't remember the year exactly, but it was like the first time I spoke at All Things Open, and my talk was solely centered around how technical writers can contribute to open source, right? And aside from that, I would give different talks like outside of like All Things Open, write articles, and just be vocal about it on social media, because I feel like half of the time the reason why people don't do stuff could be like ignorance, right? Because they don't know that it is possible for them to do it, or they've not seen someone actually do it. So when you share that it's possible to do this thing and then use your own story as an example, it just helps tie, it just makes it more like inspiring, right? Because it's not just, oh, hey, you can do this thing. It's more like, you can do this thing. I did it. Here's how I did it.
Perfect. Well, I think you're doing some amazing work, and I love how you're highlighting the other folks that are doing some amazing work as well.
Thank you.
Why are you passionate about developer relations? What's the spark?
Hey, this is Todd with All Things Open. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate it. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. We've got a lot of new content coming we think you're going to be interested in. One final favor, be sure to go to allthingsopen.org, allthingsopen.org to see everything that we do. Back to the video.
So the thing for me is, so I studied computer science, and when I studied computer science, I didn't really see myself as someone who was going to be in tech. It was just like, okay, hey, I had to go to school, right, and get a college degree. But the thing that changed it for me was when I did my internship in this company called SAT Innovation Hub, and they would host several developer community events, and you'd see people come to share their stories, because I was relatively young when I was in college, right? So even in like college and like workspaces, I would always be like the youngest person in like a midst of elderly people. But then the unique thing about this event was that I also saw several young people like myself talking about tech, talking about like their experiences and what they had learned. And the community was such a huge factor in my career. Like that, like going for that internship and being part of the developer communities was what made me decide to be in tech. It wasn't necessarily because I studied computer science. So it was hearing these people's stories, learning, trying to improve, that like gave me that thought of like, hey, I can actually be a software engineer one day. So when I eventually graduated from school and started my career as a software engineer, I thought, hey, I needed to give back as well. Like I'm here because of other people, because I heard people share their stories. I heard people teach me about like Android development. So I needed to do that too for like somebody else. And so I started just doing that even while working as a core software engineer. And then DevRel became like a thing, and I realized, oh, I could actually do this thing and still get paid, right? This thing that I really love doing, which is like writing, speaking at events, because I was already doing it when I was a core software engineer. So being able to do it and get paid and just like meeting exciting people, inspiring people, changing people's lives while still getting paid for it was just, I don't know, win-win situation if you ask me.
That's great. I'm definitely hearing a consistent theme that open source is more than just the tech. It's actually about the people.
Absolutely. It is, though. It is. I mean, tech is awesome, but like the people, the relationships you make over time is like, I like to say that's what life is about, to be honest.
Do you have any tips, best practices, or new tools that you're using that you could share with the All Things Open community?
So for tips, one thing I always like to say is put yourself out there. It was one of the advices that I got while I was starting out my career, because oftentimes people think, hey, I don't know too much, I don't really know enough, who's going to want to learn from me? But the way I like to think about it is, even if you've been in tech for like, let's say 3 months or 1 year, there's someone who is just coming into tech and has just been in tech for, let's say, 1 week, right? So the information that you have is going to be knowledgeable for that person. They want to see that, oh, this person is now 1 year into their career, and some months back they were just like me, 1 month into my career. So I'm always very conscious about telling people to like put themselves out there, share knowledge, share your experiences. You never really know whose life you're going to impact over time.
Perfect. So we have 5,000 of our open source friends here at All Things Open. Do you have any advice to offer conference attendees to how they can apply what they're learning at the conference, what to do with it after the conference is over when they get home?
Yeah, I think the amazing thing about All Things Open is like there's so much going on. Like even when you look at the shuttle, it's kind of segmented into like different things like community, DevRel, Web3, and all of that. So my advice would always be to like look through that schedule and figure out which of those talks you want to attend, right? And when you go to those talks, it's not just about like listening, it's also taking notes of like things that speak to you, things that you want to check in on after. Because I think sometimes people come to events and then when they are done, they're like, okay, fine, I'm done. But there's like the aftermath. You need to go back to look at like the notes that you had written to try to implement some of those things. Sometimes it could be that you attended a talk that taught you how to be more productive, right? Don't just stop after listening to that talk. Go back and like try to apply those things. Or it could be that you learn that maybe you want to make your first open source contribution. Don't just hear that someone made that open source contribution and leave it at that. Actively try to implement that same thing when you go back home. Like it's more about the actions as opposed to just like listening to something. So there was this quote that I heard a couple of years back. It says you only learn how to do something by doing that thing. So if you want to be active in open source, you can only be active when you actually contribute. If you want to become a better software engineer, maybe because you heard someone talk about software engineering and all things open, then actively try to continue like improving your skill as a software engineer. Like I would just recommend doing. That's like the the short version of what I was trying to say. Just do stuff.
Perfect. Well, Edidiong, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
Thank you.